Hello, today you're going to be solving quadratics using completing the square. So first off, we're going to solve these with square roots. So you have x squared plus 4x plus 4 is equal to 36. Now x squared plus 4x plus 4 can be factored. The numbers that multiply to give us 4 and add to give us 4 are 2 and 2. Because this is the same factor, we can write it as x plus 2 squared. This is also known right here as a perfect square trinomial because it factors to give us a factor squared. Perfect square trinomial. So x plus 2 squared is equal to 36. Then we take the square root of both sides. X plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 36 is 6. Subtract 2. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus 6. Negative 2 plus 6 is 4. Negative 2 minus 6 is negative 8. So 4 and negative 8 are your two answers. X squared minus 6x plus 9. Numbers that multiply to give us 9 and add to give us negative 6 are negative 3 and negative 3. So this could be factored as x minus 3 squared is equal to a positive 1. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 3 is equal to plus or minus, and the square root of 1 is 1. Add 3 to both sides. X is equal to 3 plus or minus 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. X squared minus 22x plus 121 is equal to 81. So our numbers that multiply to give us 121 and add to give us negative 22 are negative 11 and negative 11. So x minus 11 squared is equal to 81. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 11 is equal to plus or minus 9. Add 11 to both sides. X is equal to 11 plus or minus 9. 11 plus 9 is 20. 11 minus 9 is 2. So this is a nice way of solving quadratics. And we can make it work with other quadratics even if they aren't in this form by making them be in this form. Alright, so we have 6 steps for completing the square. We're going to find and move c to the other side, half the coefficients by x, square that number, add to both sides, take the square root of both sides, and solve for x. We're going to use these more on the back. For right now, what we're going to be focused on is finding out what this number needs to be so that it is a perfect square trinomial. Okay, and the way we can find out what this number is these steps 2 through 4 right here. We're going to half the coefficient of x. So half of 8 is 4, and we're going to square that number. 4 squared is 16, so that c needs to be 16. So we're going to write this as x squared plus 8x plus 16. That's the perfect square trinomial. And that will factor to be x, the numbers that multiply to give us 16 and add to give us 8 are 4 and 4. Again, these numbers must be the same so that you can write this x plus 4 squared. Number 5, negative 2, half of that is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So my value right here is going to be 1. So I'm going to have x squared minus 2x plus 1 is my perfect square trinomial. And that will factor to be x, and it's half of this number. So minus 1 squared. X squared minus 9x plus c. Alright, so half of negative 9 is negative, and I'm going to leave these as fractions. I think it's a little bit easier to work with it. So negative 9 over 2 squared. 9 squared is 81. 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to have x squared minus 9x plus 81 over 4. My factor right here is going to be x and then half of this number. So half of negative 9 is negative 9 over 2 squared. That is how we find out what we need to add to both sides and write this right here as the square of a binomial. So, solving equations using this completing the square. And I've written out my steps on the left. So I'm going to find the c and move it to the other side. So the c that we're talking about right here is this 8. So I'm going to move it over here. So I'm going to have x squared minus 4x equals negative 8. Then I'm going to half this coefficient, negative 4, half of it is negative 2, square it, that's 4, and I'm going to add this to both sides. So I'm going to add 4 to this side and to this side. So x squared minus 4x plus 4, then I'm going to write this as x minus 2 squared. Go ahead and factor it, is equal to, and negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. Now I can take the square root of both sides. So x minus 2 is equal to the square root of negative 4. So yesterday we were talking about how to take the square root of negative numbers. So we take our square root regularly, so square root of 4 is 2, and then we just put an I with it. So plus or minus 2i. And anytime you have this as an imaginary, what you can do whenever you're solving, I'm adding 2 to both sides, I can leave it with the plus or minus. So 2 plus or minus 2i. Number 8, I have x squared plus 8x minus 5. So I'm finding my c, moving it to the other side. So x squared plus 8x is equal to 5. Half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. I'm adding 16 to both sides. Then I'm going to write this as x plus, and half of 8 was 4. So x plus 4 squared is equal to 5 plus 16 is 21. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 4 is equal to plus or minus, and the square root of 21. I know that 21 factors to give me 3 and 7. Those are both prime, so I can't break my radical down any further. So I'm going to have plus or minus root of 21. So subtract 4 from both sides. So x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus root of 21. Number 9. It's much easier with completing the square if the leading coefficient is 1. Okay, so all of these numbers are divisible by negative 3. So I'm going to divide them all by negative 3. And I'm going to have x squared minus plus 6x, because I'm dividing by negative, plus 2 equals 0, because negative 0 divided by negative 3 is also 0. Now I'm going to move my c to the other side. So that gives me x squared plus 6x is equal to negative 2. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9, so I'm adding 9 to both sides. So I can factor this to be x. Half of 6 was 3, so x plus 3 squared. Because 3 times 3 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6. Equals negative 2 plus 9 is 7. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 3 is equal to plus or minus root 7. Subtract 3 from both sides. X is equal to negative 3 plus or minus root 7. Number 10. These numbers are all divisible by 4. So x squared plus 8x is equal to negative 4 goes into 6 once, 2 left over, 4 goes into 28 7 times. Half of 8 is 4, 4 squared is 16, so I'm adding 16 to both sides. So this will factor to be x plus 4, because the numbers that multiply to give me 16 and add to give me 8 are 4 and 4, squared equals negative 17 plus 16 is a negative 1. Take the square root of both sides. So x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus, and the square root of negative 1 is I. Subtract 4 from both sides. X is equal to negative 4 plus or minus I. Number 11. Now before I can solve number 11, I have to multiply this all out. So I'm going to have 6x squared plus 12x is equal to negative 42. All of these numbers are divisible by 6, so I'm going to divide this all by 6. gives me x squared plus 2x is equal to negative 7. Half of 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. I'm adding 1 to both sides. So this factors to be x plus 1 squared equals negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 1 is equal to I root of 6 plus or minus. Subtract 1 from both sides. X is equal to negative 1 plus or minus I root 6. Distribute my 2x. That gives me 2x squared minus 4x is equal to 200. I'm going to divide everything by 2. That gives me x squared minus 2x is equal to 100. Half of negative 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So x minus 1 squared is equal to 101. Take the square root. X minus 1 is equal to plus or minus the root of 101. 101 can't be broken down further. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus root 101. Write the quadratic function in vertex form and then identify the vertex. So we can use some of this to write some of our same steps for completing the square to find vertex form. We're still going to separate off this 18. I'm not going to move it to the other side, but I'm going to kind of separate it off. So I'll have y is equal to x squared minus 8x. I'm going to put my 18 over here. I'm still going to half my coefficient of x, which is 8. Half of negative 8 is negative 4. Square it. Negative 4 squared is 16. I'm going to add that 16. I'm going to go ahead and write this in parentheses, going to subtract that 16 over here. Now what that does is that lets me not change my value of the equation because I'm adding the number and subtracting that same number from the same side. So y is equal to, this will factor to be x, numbers that multiply to give me 16 and add to give me negative 8 are negative 4, so x minus 4 squared. 18 minus 6 is positive 2. So this is in vertex form. Remember your vertex form was y equals a x minus h squared plus k. So my vertex is going to be at 4, the opposite sign, and then 2. Same thing for number 14. So y is equal to x squared plus 6x. I'm going to leave a space and put 4 at the end. So half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm adding 9 right here. I'm also subtracting 9 right there. So y is equal to x, the numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 6 are 3 and 3. So x plus 3 squared. 4 minus 9 is a negative 5. So the vertex on this function will be at negative 3, negative 5. One last example. X squared minus 2x is equal to negative 6. Or sorry, y is equal to x squared minus 2x and then minus 6. Half of negative 2 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1, so I'm going to add 1 and subtract 1 from the same side. Then I'm going to simplify this, so I get x minus 1 squared minus 7. So this is vertex form, and my vertex will be at 1, negative 7.